Hey guys, guess which band this is? If you guessed Alan Parsons, that's correct. Cause, Jesus, how does a t-shirt fade this much? There's like nothing on here. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the third album from Boards of Canada, the Campfire Headphase. You know, someone left a comment on one of these latest BOC reviews that they were glad that I liked their first two albums and hoped that I didn't hate their most recent two. Well, while I'll admit I don't like their two most recent as much as the first two, well, alright, wish granted. I don't hate them at all. This album in particular, once again, totally mood music for me, and even more so than GeoGaddy. But just like GeoGaddy, once the time is right for this album, it works amazingly well. The correct time just doesn't always happen that often for me. See, this album, unlike the creepier stuff that permeates basically everything else they've ever released, is super sunny and cheerful and not remotely creepy at all. I mean, there are definitely some moments on here that remind you that this is still the same band who gave you Music Has the Right to Children and GeoGaddy, but for the most part, this was a pretty drastic change for the band. A lot of these songs heavily utilize acoustic guitars, a lot of them without even that much filtering. The result is an album that, in my opinion, is best enjoyed when the sun is out and the weather is nice. Bonus points if it's earlier in the morning. Now, of course, that doesn't happen all that often for me. First of all, because I don't usually wake up early enough for this album to have its maximum effect. And second of all, because I live in Chicago and our weather typically sucks. But just yesterday, out of nowhere, it was sunny and 60 degrees outside, and I listened to this album with my windows open, and this album shot upwards in quality like I never even expected. But that being said, the thing about this album, there is another very big problem that I have with it, and I'm just gonna get it out of the way and say it right now. I think there's one track on this album that almost completely kills the entire thing for me, and that's the ending, Farewell Fire. Now, I want to make it clear, I don't think Farewell Fire is bad out of context. I don't really like how there's a 5-minute fade out. It's a little ridiculous, but as far as minimal ambient tracks go, it's okay. Maybe could have been a leftover on Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, but I'm sorry, Farewell Fire had absolutely no business being on the Campfire Headphase, and especially not the album's ending. As part of one of the sunniest and warmest IDM albums around, if you even want to call it IDM, it is a terrible place to finish. It's completely opposite mood-wise from the rest of the album, extremely serious and sad. And it's especially bad because it's the last track on the album, because all the sunny moods that the album was building up previously are just completely eradicated by this one song. The track right before it, Tears from the Compound Eye, is also pretty downtempo and ambient-centric, but at least has a warmer and fuller feeling that fits the rest of the album. You could have finished there, and it would have been way better off. Farewell Fire is not only out of place, but undermines the entire feel of the album, and I think is the main reason why I don't return to this album nearly as often as I'd like. It's like finishing off a romantic comedy movie that previously just followed all the same formulas as romantic comedies do, with a random scene at the end of, like, the girl in the movie mourning the death of the guy in the movie because it's like 50 years in the future or something. It just didn't need to be there, and I think really works against what this album was going for. I really felt its bad placement yesterday when the weather was nice, and instead of improving my mood and getting me ready for another EP listen, I suddenly didn't want to come back to it. I personally recommend only listening to Farewell Fire out of context to the album, because in context it just doesn't work. But as for the rest of the album, you take that track out, you put it like if you were to put it on a different BOC album or something, what you have left is actually really solid. Like I said, you do have the occasional interlude, which reminds you, yes, this is in fact a Boards of Canada album. like the intro, Into the Rainbow Vein, which is fairly similar to Wildlife Analysis from Music Has the Right, as well as A Moment of Clarity and At Taron Chronon, and also one track called Sherbet Head, which sounds like it could have been another GeoGaddy interlude, but stretched out a little longer. But the vast majority of this album takes the usual atmospheric Boards of Canada formulas and gives them lots of sunny post-rock influences and acoustic guitars. And I think it works really well. For instance, the opener, Chromakey Dreamcoat, gives you a good indication of what you're getting into. Repetitive guitar melodies, warm and bright ambient pads, a fairly up-tempo beat. This track even has a nice piano outro that complements everything pretty well. Really good track there. Or the slow and plodding but still light and happy Satellite Anthem Icarus, which has a particularly catchy guitar pattern accompanied by lots of fluttering and bright synths. Or the warm and comforting Peacock Tale, which is mainly characterized by these kind of quiet, vibraphone-esque tones. And these particularly nice choir synth pads. Fantastic feel-good vibes all around. Probably the biggest standout on this album for me, though, is also probably the least BOC-sounding track, Dayvan Cowboy. This track has lots of distorted guitars at the beginning, complemented with these almost kind of cold synth pads in the background. And later on, the guitars get really full sounding and twangy, and then complemented with these great string section synths, making it like some kind of Western movie soundtrack theme or road trip movie theme or whatever. It even brings in completely acoustic drums that get really intense near the end. I mean, this track is totally uncharacteristic of the band, but it's also really fun. I think it's one of the best tracks they've ever done. And of course, there's still plenty of other standouts. The track 80 for Pontiac Dream has a lot of these fluttering synth melodies and super low quality orchestral samples like you'd expect out of BOC, but also some occasional piano sounds which remind me less of BOC than they do of Air. Or the track Oscar See-Through Red Eye, which is also covered in warm synth melodies, with some occasional reversed samples that give the track some weird, almost Beatles Magical Mystery Tour era vibes to it. The track Hey Saturday Sun also is like the happy version of the track Julian Candy from GeoGaddy, complete with haunting flutes and slow plodding beat. Even tracks like Slow This Bird Down, which are more down-tempo, tend to be in major keys and have a more relaxed feeling. Maybe a little like Dawn Chorus from GeoGaddy, but with not as harsh synth tones. But as far as individual tracks go, that's about all I have to say. Overall, I think there's a lot to like about the Campfire Headphase. Do I have my problems with it? Yes. Do I have to be in a certain mood to enjoy it? Yes. And would I remove the final track if given the chance? Absolutely. Without hesitation. But I think for what this album is trying to do, it does it very well. The sunny atmosphere legitimately makes me look forward to morning. Something that I don't think any albums do. I mean, there are other sunny and bright albums that I like Fortet's Rounds, that actually put me in the mood for this by themselves without requiring those conditions as a prerequisite like this one does. But once the conditions are right, I think this album is really fantastic and is right up to BOC's usually high standards. It is really different from their usual stuff, and I can understand that can be a turnoff for some people, but for me, it totally works. I would just skip Farewell Fire and save that for a less sunny time and place. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.